Hey everyone, and welcome to this live stream here on Facebook. How to create your own home studio with M Audio. My name is Alex, live streaming from California. If you guys are familiar with Southern California, we're live streaming from Apple Valley, which is still part of Southern California. So first off, I just want to hear where you guys are from. Anyone that's chiming in, if you guys are on the chat, please write there on the chat where you're from. If you're from the US, what state you guys are from. If you're international, I'd love to also know where you're coming from. Cool. So in this next 45 minute session, we're going to cover a number of things. First of all, we're going to talk about just in broad general, what is it to create your own home studio. I'm going to show you guys some killer new products. And then we're going to do a Pro Tools demo showing you guys all the different plugins that you can use that come free with the M Audio products. Just to give you guys a little background about myself, my name is Alex Solano. I've been working in the industry for about 15 years. I started my first job with M Audio tech support, and I actually started answering phones and doing that kind of thing. And at the time, M Audio was owned by Avid and DigiDesign, so it gave me a lot of exposure to the world of Pro Tools, which is really, really cool. And ever since, I've been doing a number of things. A lot of you guys have seen different videos online on YouTube and that sort of stuff. As a musician and as a producer, I love producing. I like also engineering and mastering. That's kind of like my niche. And utilizing all kinds of stuff from plugins to hardware, different types of microphones when recording. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So first and foremost, I want to show you guys just one of the new bundles that M Audio has to offer, which is called the Air 192. I have a box of it here, which you can see. It says your perfect sound. And this box is cool because this includes all the essentials that you guys need to get your home studio set up. It includes an audio interface, 2-channel audio interface, which in layman's terms, it's an external sound card. An external sound card is needed because it's going to give you way better quality than your computer headphones or your computer microphone. The other thing that it includes is a condenser microphone. And a condenser microphone, which is this one that I'm using right here, it's called the Nova Black. This is a studio grade microphone used for, recording guitars, recording acoustic instruments, recording your voice. And then lastly, the headphones, which you guys can see here that I'm wearing. So I'm going to go through kind of like the unboxing so we can look at all the components that this studio bundle comes with. And then I'll take your questions here on the chat. And then we'll jump into the demo. Cool? So here we go. We'll switch over. So here we are with the M Audio Vocal Studio Pro. This is the Air 192.4. There are multiple interfaces, but this one in particular gives you 2 channels. So when we open up the contents of the box, you're going to see that there's 2 main boxes there. One on the left and one on the right. And this one right here named M Audio is basically going to be where the interface is. So that's going to be the quick start guide, the manual. Let's kind of open this up a little bit here. All right. And this is the interface. This is called the Air 192.4. This is a 2-in, 2-out interface. As you can see, it's made out of solid metal, really strong, real sturdy, something that sits nicely on your desk with 2 knobs there for gain input, the main big knob for monitor. Then you have USB and direct for playback, so you can monitor with no latency, or you can monitor directly from your computer. A dedicated headphone volume. Instrument input here, which is really important, which is separate from a line input, which is on the back. That's a combo jack. And we'll talk about that later too. Phantom power for condenser microphones. And then you have a dedicated headphone switch there with its own volume knob. So real sturdy, real essential. 2 main outputs, crystal preamps. This is exclusive from M Audio. This is proprietary preamps, which we'll get into in the demo as well. They sound fantastic, whether you're using a condenser microphone or a dynamic microphone, they sound great. And USB-C, as you can see, USB-C is the new technology that a lot of the new computers are using. We'll talk about that in a minute. And also the cables that it includes. But that's it. That's the interface. Let's move this to the side and let's take a look at some of the cables here. So this actually comes with 2 cables, which is really cool because other interfaces in the market don't give you the cables. This is USB-C to USB standard, which is 2.0, 3.0, and then USB-C to USB-C. So you don't have to buy additional cables. This comes with the cables. It's all included. All right. Let's put that back and let's take a look at the next box, which is going to include the headphones and the microphone. All right. So as you can see here, you have the headphones right there. These are the ones that we're going to be using. They're closed back headphones. And these are studio grade headphones, which basically means when you're recording your vocals, it's not going to leak out the audio, through the mic. So you can see, nice look, closed back headphones. They fit nicely, and they give you a cable with both the 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch jack. All right, good. This is the pop filter that's going to go on the microphone, which eliminates any pops, like when you say the P, it's like a wind filter. And a dedicated bag, so you can store that away nice in your studio. Now, this is the Nova microphone. M-Audio used to make a number of microphones. Since I've been working with the company, we've made quite a few. 2 microphones, condenser microphones. This one is very economical as far as it's very sturdy. It sounds great, great price point, and it's a cardioid microphone with the connector on the back there. All right, so you can just slip that into the bag, put the microphone in, put your cables in, put the pop filter on, and then store that away. Cool, very simple. All right, so let's go ahead and put that to the side now, and let's see what else we got. So this part right here is actually the clip. This is gonna, you're gonna put the condenser mic into this, and then this is gonna be screwed into the mic stand. And it works compatible with any mic stand. And then lastly, the XLR cable, which is really important because this is going to, if you don't have an XLR cable, then you can use the one that comes with it. So we'll close this up, put that away, and that gives you guys an idea of all the components that come with the M-Audio bundle. All right, good. So let's go ahead and switch over here, back to my screen, and let's talk a little bit more in depth about this interface. All right, so one of the things that I want to kind of talk about that I get asked a lot, which is, how do I set up proper gain staging? In other words, how do I know how loud to turn my microphone? A lot of you guys, just like myself, start out figuring this stuff out on your own, kind of watching YouTube videos and figuring out, okay, how do I record my voice? How do I mix my music? Which plugin should I use? Which plugin should I buy? And it's really not that hard. It's actually really simple. So for one thing, you're going to notice on the M-Audio interfaces right here on the meters, you're going to see -20, -6, -3 in clip. Whenever you're adjusting the gain volume to your microphone, whether you're recording voice or recording guitar, you want to turn it up until it's between -6 and -3. If it's past -3, it's going to turn red and it's going to clip. And that's not necessarily good because if it's distorting your recorded signal, it's hard to undo. It's better to get a clean signal that's at the right volume than if it's too loud. If it's too loud, it can clip and distort, and that's going to be part of the sound that you're going to have to work with later or fix or repair, and you don't want that. And if the volume is too low, when you crank it up in the mix, in the editor on your computer, it's going to bring up a bunch of noise. So that's really important. The other thing that's important to understand here is the input. So as you can see, this is a guitar line input. This is important because the instrument input on here, it's you don't need to buy a direct box. For example, if I have an electric guitar and I want to get sound into like a sound system, you can't just plug that into a mixing board and then crank up the volume. It's going to sound really bad. In fact, you're going to get a lot of hum from it. So the reason this is a dedicated input, instrument input, is because it eliminates having to buy a separate device, which is called a DI box. It changes the impedance of the input to match your instrument so that you can get the best sound into your computer. All right, good. So let's go ahead and put that aside. And let's take a look here at the software. All right, so for this example, I'm using Pro Tools. This does come with a license of Pro Tools First M-Audio Edition, which I'm going to show you guys some plugins. And it also comes with Ableton Live Lite. In fact, a lot of the plugins that I'm going to be using here on this demo come with the M Audio bundle. And some of the plugins are not part of the bundle, but you guys can buy separate. Big ups online to Mr. Jason Gittens from Trinidad. Welcome. All right, so let's take a look here at how we can get started with the production. So I'll go ahead and hide my camera, and we have a demo here. All right. So usually when I start, creating or building a track, I usually like to start with some kind of idea, whether it's a loop, whether it's a drum beat, whether it's a chord progression or something. So here we're going to start with guitars. Guitars is one of my favorite instruments because I play guitar. And so let's start with the guitars. So for starters, I'll bypass all the effects and let's just hear the guitar loop that we're working with. Okay, so it's a pretty simple guitar loop. So let's go ahead and use some of the stock plugins that come with Pro Tools and Pro Tools First to get started. For starters, I have this first top guitar loop that sounds like this. It's got a really cool, nice reverse effect on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to EQ it. I'm going to filter out the lows, the low mids, and the highs. And this is going to make it sound smaller. Now, the reason I want to make it sound smaller is because I'm going to be adding a bunch of stuff to this track. I'm going to be adding drums, bass, sub-lows, percussions, and all kinds of stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is use EQ to filter out the lows and the highs. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a separate plugin, which is called Air Lo-Fi. And I want to mention that Air Music Tech, which is the name of the M Audio bundle, which is Air 192. Air Music Tech plugins are developed by a German company called Air Music Tech. And they make a lot of effects plugins and also virtual instruments. So everything that I'm going to show you guys is from that. All right. So this plugin right here is called Lo-Fi. And you can hear the Lo-Fi effect in a lot of more modern urban music. And it basically makes it sound vintage, makes it sound like almost dated, like from the 50s or 60s. So I'm going to play around with these settings, make it sound extreme, and then dial it back a bit. Here we go. Okay, cool. So a combination of both the EQ and also the Lo-Fi plugin allows me to get some more interesting sounds out of this guitar loop. The next guitar part, which is here at the bottom, let's go ahead and solo that so you guys can hear it. That was simply me playing my Strat into the interface into the computer. Now, I didn't use an amp, therefore I'm going to be using some of the stock amps that comes with Pro Tools First. This one in particular is called 11 Lite. And with 11 Lite, you get two models. You get Vintage Crunch and you get Modern Overdrive. For this example, we're going to be using Vintage Crunch and just adding a little bit of gain and presence. So this is before and after. Let's hear that with the original loop. Okay, cool. So we spiced up our guitar loop initially from its raw sound. Now let's move on to something more interesting, such as the beat. So for the drums, I have some loops here that I've added, and I'm also using some plugins from Air Music Tech, such as reverb and distortion. And I gotta say, I own a lot of plugins from third-party manufacturers, but there are certain things that I go to every time with the Air plugins because it's just really easy to dial in. In particular, the reverb and the distortion, I use that a lot on whether it's synths, whether it's live instruments. Sometimes I even use it on vocals just to kind of get a different tone or tonality from my mix. But let's bring in these loops so you guys can get an idea of what these sound like. All right, cool. So we definitely have a nice groove going on here. And let's take a look at what we're doing here. So with this percussion right here, which you guys can hear as some kind of claps. Yep. We're using both reverb and distortion. Without it, it just sounds pretty dry like this. Okay. But we're adding a little bit more excitement to it. All right. And then we just have some basic stuff here programmed, like such as the kick and the snare and everything else. So to make it more, to make it more interesting, more than just a drum loop and some guitar loops, we're going to add some bass. And this is the first plugin that I want to show you guys here with regards to the software synths. Okay. This one is called Vacuum Pro, and this is one of my favorites from Air Music Tech. So let me just explain a little bit because I get asked this a lot. You know, some of these plugins look similar to what comes free with Pro Tools, and it's true. And the reason for that is because Air Music Tech licenses those plugins to Pro Tools. So anytime you have a Pro Tools rig installed on your computer and you have some VST synths, they actually come from this company called Air Music Tech. The version that comes free with Pro Tools Standard is called Vacuum. And then this one is called Vacuum Pro. And Vacuum Pro is a beast. It's a two-part synth, part A and part B. And then you get the Smart Panel. The Smart Panel is one of my favorite things to use, especially when sound designing, because it allows me to toggle through all these different presets that exist in the software, which is hundreds of them. And if I want to make it darker, I just dial the tone back. If I want to give it more fatness, I just increase that fatness button. So it's really cool in the way that they simplify it. I can go there and get really geeky and just really filter this thing out, you know, with envelopes and filters and vacuum tube amps and all that stuff. But if I wanted to make it real simple, as far as the user interface, I can do that as well. All right, so we have here a bass loop, which I've programmed, which is a couple of bass notes. And let me dial back the volume because I know it's going to be a little loud. Let me go ahead and play that with the drums. Now, I like the notes that I'm playing, but I think the bass patch itself sounds too aggressive. So instead of using all the filters in here, which I can, and I already have, I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to use a third-party filter or an additional filter outside of the plugin, and this one's called the Air Vintage Filter. This is a really cool trick, and I know you guys have this on your computer if you guys are using Pro Tools. You're going to use the band mode called BP, which is Band Pass Filter. You're going to set the cutoff somewhere between 60 and 80 hertz. Now check this out. It's going to blow you away. This is before. And this is after. So as you can tell, it just really rounds off that bass, makes it sound real fat and real warm, and all you get is the sub low. And this works perfect with almost any urban genre, reggaeton music, with any of that stuff. And then lastly, we're going to put some compression on there so that every time the kick hits, it creates a sidechain compression into the bass. Okay, perfect. So we got a couple of elements here. And again, if you guys have any questions on the chat, feel free to leave them there so we can view that. So we got a couple of elements here on the production. We started off with a guitar loop, which is basically our main idea. Let's go ahead and just put this away. We started off with a guitar loop, and that's what started creating the creative juices, right? If you can say it that way. Then we added some percussion so that we can have some kind of rhythmic element to go off of. And now we have the bass, and the bass allows us to figure out what chord structure we're going to use on the song. So 3 elements, and so far so good. Let's go to the next level. The next level is being able to put synth melodies or lines or chords. And for the chords, we're going to continue to use some of the virtual instruments here on Air. For the next one up, we're going to be using something called Expand. All right. Now, Expand is one of my favorites. I know it's been free and stocked with Pro Tools, but most recently we made it VST and AU. So that means that you can use it outside of Pro Tools, such as programs like Ableton, Logic Pro X, and many others, Studio One. And what I love about Expand is that it gives me all the essential sounds that I need when I'm creating music. So if I'm looking for a stock piano sound, I can find it. If I need some strings, I can find it. In fact, this comes with over 2,000 different presets or sounds that I can select from, which is great. Expand has 4 parts, A, B, C, and D. And the way I like to think about it is when I started making music when I was 14, 15, 16, I had a workstation called the Yamaha SY77. And the Yamaha SY77 had a ton of sounds that allowed me to sequence, so create drum loops and sequence everything within the machine. And that would be a modern day Yamaha motif or Roland Phantom. And Expand is essentially that. It's the brains or the module of a workstation giving you all the essential sounds that you need. But it also allows you to edit and custom create your own sounds. So let's go back here and check out what we have. All right, so what I like to do is find an element in the song that I'm already working with. In this case, I already have the guitars that are here. They're soloed. Let's go ahead and play that from here. And I want to mimic that, or I want to double that melody using a not real guitar. In fact, this patch is called Fake Strat. Okay, cool. So let's check out what the preset is made out of. It's made out of part A, which is a metallic type of sound, which is right here. I can go in there and I can turn up the delay. And then it's made out of part B, which is a mandolin. So both together sound like that. And I like that as a production trick because this allows me to create complementary melodies of things that I already have in the production. So if I record a electric guitar part, I try to find a melody within that that I can recreate using a synth. And then those 2 layers just create more interest in the music. Cool. The Expand plugins. So let me talk a little bit about what comes in the bundle. This particular bundle gives you the hardware, like I mentioned, and it gives you Pro Tools First and Audio Edition, 11 Lite, which I showed you guys on the first example with the electric guitar. It gives you Mini Grand, which is a acoustic piano synth. It gives you Boom, which we're going to get into in a minute. Ableton Live Lite, the Creative Effects Collection, which are all the Air plugins that I just showed you guys. In fact, I'm going to show you some more. Expand 2 is included. So that means you can use Expand 2 outside of Pro Tools in Ableton or Studio One. Vacuum, and Touch Loops, which is additional loop content. All right. So let's get back here to the demo. Let's go ahead and hide this for now. And let's go back to the drums. So far we have bass, we have guitar, and we have drums. And now we have this additional melody. But I forgot to mention this one right here, which is Boom. Okay. And Boom is a recreation of a vintage 808 drum machine, to say it simply. And this is going to give you those classic, 808 sounds, 909 sounds. In fact, here you have different kit presets. All right, let's go ahead and check out this part. Hopefully you guys don't laugh, but it will fit into the song. Trust me. All right, I know. You guys are thinking like, what is that doing in this production? It sounds like an old organ drum machine. Well, the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to tweak it with some ambience. All right. So we're going to add reverb. And then we're going to filter out the lows. Now, by itself, it doesn't sound that interesting, but when you add the top loop, then that's where it gets a little bit more updated. And the reason we did that is so that it could add a little bit more interest in the song. That way it's not just drum loops. So let's skip over here to the verse and we can hear it in context with the beat. All right, so hopefully I redeemed myself there from that goofy moment and you guys can actually hear that it does sound good. Cool, so we got drums, we got guitars, we got a melody, we got a bass. Now let's add some additional elements such as chords. All right, so for the chords part, we're gonna bring up the synths, which is this right here. Let's go ahead and solo that. And with this part, we're gonna have a couple of things. We're gonna have Vacuum Pro again, which we used earlier. But we're also going to include another one, which is called Loom. Now, these look fantastic and they sound great. They have tons of presets to get started with, and then they do some really synth geeky stuff, which we're not going to get into that deep in this demo, but maybe in the future. So the reason I wanted to bring these two up is just to kind of show you guys both differences between something that's more traditional of a vintage synth, which is this one right here, Vacuum Pro, and then show you guys something that's more what's called a granular synth, which is this right here. Cool. So what we want to do is we want to continue on that process or that thought process of adding complementary melodies or complementary chords to what's already existing. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's go back to the guitar example. We have this guitar loop, which we created, which is this right here. Okay, so we got this guitar loop. And we want to add something that's going to be complementary to that. We don't want the guitarist to be by himself, right? We want to kind of build a band around it. So for that, we're using Vacuum Pro to create these chordal progressions. So then when you put that together, you're going to have something that's going to be both the melody from the guitar, and we're also going to have the chords from the synth. All right, so let's take it a step further and let's add another synth, which is going to be part of that chord progression, and that's going to be hybrid. Now, hybrid again is another style of synth here with tons of sounds. In fact, we use this preset called Direct Wurlitzer, which is more of a keyboard. And we get this nice little melody there. But we're going to make that melody more interesting by adding a number of things. Well, as you can see, the screen just filled up with plugins. What's that about? Cool. So the first thing we're going to do is add a reverb. All right. Put some dynamic delay, so it's going to make it bounce left and right. You guys hear that? Put a little flanger to give it some movement. And then lastly, use some EQ. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and listen to that in context with everything else. Here we go from the top. All right, cool. So hopefully you guys can hear that just with a couple of movements and some production tricks, we can get something going. Obviously, we don't have a singer here. We don't have somebody to write lyrics. That would be for phase 2 of the production. But at least we can build a track and build it around a couple of guitar melodies and things like that. I want to go back to the guitars and kind of show you a little bit more of what I did here. Because with the recording interface, you can just plug your electric guitar into it and start creating your own ideas as far as recording your own melodies. But then with the plugins, you can take that a step further. And as a guitarist, I love using pedals. I love using amps. I love using impulse responses for cabinets and things like that. In fact, I have another product that just does that all day long. But let's have a look to see what you can actually do with just the stock plugins, because that's what this webinar is really all about. Okay. So here we have this guitar loop, which I recorded, which is this right here. All right. And with nothing, it sounds like this. It just has a little reverb and that's it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to use dynamic delay, which is this plugin right here. And I want it to bounce left and right of my headphones. All right, we got that going. Next is going to go into the amp. And here we can try vintage crunch or modern drive, which we have vintage crunch here. We set to normal, not bright. And then this is also going to increase the vibrato. Excellent. And then lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to use this plugin called Spring Reverb. Spring Reverb is something you would commonly find on a vintage guitar amp. And so we're going to use the Spring Reverb plugin to recreate that ambient sound. So now we've made something completely more interesting, where the original sound sounded like this. Now we have something that sounds way more evolved like this. And in context with our mix, so again, it's those little things that really was, that's really making a change and everything. So I see a couple of people here on the chat. Anthony Bailey, big ups from Jamaica. Mr. Thomas Martinez. Great to have you guys on board. All right. And let me see. The last thing I guess I'll show you guys, since we're kind of coming up to the end of this webinar. And again, I encourage you guys to ask any questions. If you're too shy, that's fine. You can message me later. I understand. All right, let's go here now into this clip. All right, so we're going to separate our minds from, the production aspect, from plugins, from VSTs, and we're going to go back to the basics. All right, we're going to talk about, what is the most important thing when you're recording audio? Like, how do you get a clean sound? What mic should I use? Should I invest in a $3,000 interface? Should I buy $5,000 headphones? Just kidding. Hopefully there's not products out there that are $5,000 headphones, but in case they are, I'm sure they're good. All right, so let's talk about the essentials. All right, the most basic things. We have an audio interface, which is an external sound card. We plug a mic into it. We plug it into the computer. Now what do? Well, we have to figure out what microphone we're going to use. And in my experience, and a lot of you guys have experience there too, as far as different microphones, there's essentially two types. There's condenser mics, which is what I'm using here on the live stream. And then there's a dynamic microphone, which is what most people use on stage when they're performing live. The reason that dynamic microphones are used more on live scenarios versus studio is because they capture the immediacy of your sound and they block out all the background noise. So if you're on stage singing and you got a microphone like an SM58, it's not going to pick up the feedback from your monitors. It's going to reject that. But a condenser microphone, if I don't have a filter gate on or a expander gate on this, you're going to hear my dogs barking in the other room. Trust me. That's why I'm using a filter gate here. So going back to this, when you plug in a condenser mic to this, where do you set the level? Well, like I mentioned earlier, you want to set it so that it's peaking between -6 and -3. If it goes into the red, that means that it's too hot. You got to dial it back. And what I want to show you guys here on the screen so that so I can show you like a real life example is this right here, this audio recording. Okay. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of productions. I do songwriting as far as like music production. I do a lot of engineering. And in one of my most recent projects before this quarantine happened, I was able to book some time at a university, actually where I went to and studied. And I took my laptop. I took the M audio interface, the one that I'm using for this demonstration. And I took a condenser mic. And the only reason I used the university was not for their equipment. I didn't use any of their equipment. They had Neumanns, they had AKG, they had other kinds of microphones, which were really nice. I didn't use any of that. I used my audio interface, trust me, and I used my condenser microphone. I didn't use this one. I used a more expensive one. But that's the beauty about having your own audio interface. You can use any mic that you want. And so what I'm going to play for you guys is a raw vocal recording of what the preamps sound like. Because if you notice here, let me go ahead and switch back to the camera. There we go. You're going to see something called Crystal Preamps, which is this shiny logo right there. And Crystal Preamps is a proprietary preamp technology that M-Audio uses on all their interfaces. So you guys are going to hear what the preamp sounds like raw without any processing on these vocals. Here we go. Check it out.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti. Lo que nos une a los dos es un lazo de amor puesto por Dios. Que el Señor bendiga nuestro matrimonio. Que la paz de Dios reine en nuestras vidas.
So, it's not bad sounding at all. It actually sounds really clean, real clear too. You hear the nice clarity and the shininess on the top end. But now we're going to tame all that. You know, the most important thing is to get a really clean recording, and then you can go afterwards and add plugins. So in under 5 minutes, I'm going to show you guys how to process raw vocals to get best results. My friend Thomas, I know you'll enjoy this. All right, so let's go off camera and let's check this out. So the first thing that I identified on this vocal was that it's got a lot of brightness. Listen to it again.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti.
All right, so the first thing we're going to use is use a stock plugin, which is the de-esser. And the de-esser is going to control all the sibilants in the voice. We're going to hit listen, and we're going to filter the frequency to attack. Okay, cool. Now let's listen it with the plugin.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti.
This gain reduction meter, you want it to be somewhere between -1 and -3.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti.
Okay, good. So that's a good starting point. Next up, we're going to use EQ. And we're going to use corrective EQ. What that means is that we're going to eliminate any rumble or resonant frequencies. And I'm going to identify one for you guys right here.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti.
So you hear that kind of like rumble and feedback almost. So we're going to eliminate that. We're going to bring that down. Now, you might be wondering, what is that noise, right? And as long as I've been doing this, anytime you're recording in a home studio because you are limited to the acoustic space of your room or your closet or your corner or your kitchen, and trust me, I've been through it all. One time I had my studio desk set up in the kitchen of our apartment when we had a 1-bedroom apartment and we had a baby, and you know, you kind of go through life and you make do with what you have. So, you know, you have to find ways to be creative and eliminate this kind of stuff. But in my experience, when recording in a home studio environment, because it's a very closed space and there's not a lot of acoustic treatment, the microphone is going to pick up the surrounding environment. So that means that, let me go and switch here. That means that if I start singing, and I'm not going to, I'll save you guys. But if I start singing, the microphone's not only listening to my voice, even though I'm this close to it, it's going to pick up any reflections from the ceiling. It's going to pick up reflections from the sides. It's going to pick up reflections from the back. And in fact, if I clap away from the microphone, you guys are going to hear that. So you guys hear all that room that's in here. Now, I do have acoustic treatment and all that stuff, but there's always going to be ambient space or ambient room sound in any environment. And so going back to this frequency right here, even though we recorded in a vocal booth, it bounced, the sound bounced off the vocal booth space, and it created this nasty resonance frequency.
Mi amor entero te lo doy.
And that's why we're eliminating that. Cool. And then anything else that we're doing here is just boosting up some clarity. All right, next up is going to be some compression. All right, again, this is free. This comes with the software. It's called the Bomb Factory 76. It's been around forever, and we're going to use this to squeeze the vocals into place.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti.
So without those, let's hear the original raw vocals.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti.
And now with de-esser, EQ, and compression.
Mi amor entero te lo doy, solo es para ti.
Okay, the last thing that we can use or focus on would be some ambient reverb and a little bit of delay. And again, keeping it all stock, using a little bit of room reverb and ping pong delay here.
Lo que nos une a los dos es un lazo de amor puesto por Dios. Que el Señor bendiga nuestro matrimonio. Que la paz de Dios reine en nuestras vidas.
So, not bad for a $99 interface, right? Choose yourself a really good microphone if you can make the investment, and you can get some amazing results in your own home studio. So these are some kind of tips and tricks that you guys can apply in your own setup. And again, they're not limited to Pro Tools. We're just basically taking the concepts here of how to use a de-esser, how to use an equalizer, how to use a compressor. And just to show you guys, we're not using anything on the master bus. I am not cheating. I don't have like a Waves L2 limiter or anything like that. Everything's bypassed. Everything's deactivated on the master. So all you guys are hearing is the raw vocal recording from the session, and then just some basic tools to apply when you're cleaning up vocals. Good. All right, guys. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you guys for joining for this M Audio live stream on how to create your own home studio. I believe the M Audio team has been responding to some questions on there, kind of leaving some links there. And just to reiterate, setting up your own home studio is not that complicated. If you have a good computer, and by a good computer, I mean something with a processor of an Intel 5 or higher. If you have good RAM, 2 gigabytes of RAM, if you have enough space on your computer, you can get the stuff going on your own. Anyone can really do this on their own. It's just a matter of crafting your skill and fine-tuning your acoustic space or your room to get the best results. So as always, my name is Alex. It was a pleasure being with you guys here. If you guys have additional questions, you can leave them on the chat and I'll get to them later. But again, thank you guys so much for joining. I hope to see you again real soon. All right. Be safe out there.